Слава Україні!
Hello everybody, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic time and I hope that you've had a wonderful last week. There's been a ton of stuff that's been going on throughout the world while we've been gone. Now, what do we do here at the new news? Well, everything we do is for charity. 100% of everything that we do is for charity. If you check out the video description in the link below, you're going to see a ton of different links, and all of those are for different charities and fundraisers and stuff that we're doing all over the world. We're supporting organizations, and we hope to, at some point, do stuff for, even more locations. I'm talking about places in Africa, Ethiopia, of course. We're also covering a ton for Ukraine, and you guys allow us as the community to do these things. The only way we're able to do any of this is with your guys' support. That's what we do. We're the news that gives back. So we report on the news every single day at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, and you guys come and join us, and of course I can answer your questions as best as I can. And you guys have been wonderful in supporting us. Now, we haven't been live in quite some time, and there's obviously some reasons for that. So if you check out previously, so there's been some upgrades to the stream, obviously. This is the first time I ever showed my face on stream. Well, we got a camera, I got a second monitor, I got a nice neat new desk, and we've also moved. So if you can obviously tell, there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done, but we're working through that. But we need to get back to doing this because this is a cause we actually care about. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, though, that are in the description, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay too. Just help us grow this thing. The more people that join us here, the more of an impact we're going to have overall, and I think that's the important thing. So give us a like, give us a subscribe, let your friends know about us, pass the word around, because I can't think of a better thing to back than to just provide for as many people as possible that are suffering through the very news we're talking about every single day. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and get right into the news. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the news stream. I do answer them to the best of my ability. I can hopefully read and keep up to some of those now that I have a second monitor and can actually watch the chat a little bit myself. Of course, I always have Riley, my wonderful assistant, helping me in this. And so hopefully we'll be able to answer those questions. A little bit of background about me. I was an O-352 anti-tank missileman in the United States Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I deployed twice, once to Syria and once to Iraq, and I spent 4 years there as a corporal. And I've tried to specialize in as many things as I can, but I best suited with answering questions regarding anti-armor warfare and armored strategies, especially when it comes to the Russian doctrine. Now, I'll try to answer everything I can to the best of my ability, at least at the basic infantryman stuff, but once again, I'm not an expert in anything past those, so do take it with a grain of salt, and I highly recommend you do your own research. But with that, we're going to go ahead and jump right into the news. And the first thing that we have is, of course, jumping down here into Kyiv. So it's the wee early hours over in Ukraine right now. And for them, it's actually Independence Day. So happy Independence Day if you are Ukrainian. I'm really happy to see that you're able to celebrate this Independence Day. Maybe not in Kyiv and areas, no large gatherings, of course, as Ukraine has declared that is not safe. They're worried about Russian reprisals and using the opportunity to attack. However, there has been some pretty important news that's been ongoing, and it's pretty significant. If we go down here, well, the first thing is, of course, happy Independence Day. So we have a couple of different things here for y'all, and shrink myself down a little bit there. And as we report tonight, it is the 31st Independence Day for Ukraine. Ukraine gained its independence in 1991 following the fall of the Soviet Union. Once the Soviet Union collapsed and most countries gained their independence, Germany was reunified, and a lot of chaos in that early period, a lot of unfortunate bloodshed in places such as Yugoslavia and the follow-on breakup of Yugoslavia. But overall, things have been, in general, pretty stable. And then you had the Maidan Revolution here in Ukraine back in 2014, where they truly gained a lot of their independence and no longer really backed Russia. Russian influence had really caused a lot of corruption, a lot of issues within the country itself. But luckily, they get to enjoy this one a little bit, despite being a country at war, and we're happy to see that as things go on. Of course, the thing is that Russia is already starting off this Independence Day with a bang, and that's because Russia has been shelling as air raid sirens are going off across the entirety of Ukraine right now. The entirety. As we speak, they're shelling in places such as Kharkiv and Dnipro, Zaporizhia, everywhere across the country. It's being bombed and shelled just because they're intensifying it just because it's Independence Day for them. So just take a look. So obviously quite a bit going on there, and it's unfortunate to see, but that is pretty much what we're seeing across the country. And we can even see here the map, as we can see these areas in red are currently where there is ongoing sirens. Of course, you have areas that are also under Russian occupation right now included in these regions. So you have to be cognizant of that fact. There's a lot of people right now that really just can't celebrate their own Independence Day because they're a country at war. And it's the worst war so far, really since the end of World War II inside of Europe. Now, a lot of things that Russia likes to bring up regarding whether or not it's the worst war in Europe is things like the breakup of Yugoslavia. The thing is that while a lot of things happened during the breakup of Yugoslavia, to include genocide and ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity in general, which were actually prosecuted in the International Criminal Court, the fact is that there has not been two industrialized nations, independent industrialized nations, fighting each other in a massive ground campaign within Europe since the end of World War II, nearly 80 years ago. So it's absolutely devastating, and unfortunately a lot of people, despite it being their Independence Day, are suffering as a result. But there is a little bit of happy news, and that is that Ukraine is looking at building its new navy already. In fact, in a decree signed just today by President Zelensky, they're going to be getting their very first corvette. It's currently being built. It's known as Hetman Ivan Mazepa, who was a Ukrainian Cossack, and he was a military leader of the Cossacks within the Zaporizhia region between 1687 and 1708. His name was pretty tainted underneath the Soviet Union and pretty oppressed in general. In fact, it was used as a derogatory term, especially for Cossacks in general and Ukrainians within Ukraine during the time of the Soviet Union. And why is this important? Well, Ukraine really doesn't have a navy anymore. They had several surface vessels, usually a little bit smaller, that they did have, and a lot of those were taken at the occupation of Crimea. And then you're talking about after those losses, during the opening parts of this war, especially in places like Odessa, the Ukrainian Navy scuttled all their major surface vessels out of fear that they may be captured by the Russians and turned against them. So they scuttled their ships, sank them themselves, those that weren't already seized in 2014. And at this point, really all they have is some small rigid craft and river boats and patrol boats, shore patrol boats. Not really anything. This is going to be the brand new Otta class. It's a corvette frigate. And once again, it's the very first one has already received its name, the Hetman Ivan Mazepa. And this is coming directly from the General Staff of Ukraine, who's the leading officers of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And we can see that ship here. So pretty significant, pretty important that they're going to be doing this, that they're looking towards the future. Ukraine at this point, while it is a war of attrition, Ukraine is definitely winning that. And when it comes to firepower parity, it's a 1-to-1 on the battlefield right now, but that's very quickly and shifting into Ukraine's favor, and we'll get to that here in just a few moments. But we're looking at things such as possibly taking back Crimea, which is a huge thing. In fact, that was a clearly stated end goal by President Zelensky, especially immediately following those Crimean strikes. It's not the only force. That's not the only thing. So if you may have heard, over the last few days, there's been several explosions, which we'll also cover, in the Belgorod Oblast. In fact, there was another one just today. And the Defense Ministry of Ukraine has their official Twitter, and we follow that as well. Well, they've been pretty hilarious over the last couple of days and over the last about week. Whoever's running this has the same mentality of think of the Wendy's Twitter, the savage Wendy's Twitters, and that's pretty much what Ukraine's armed forces Twitter is. So this is their official post. And it says, this is a government agency. And they said another detonation of ammo due to heat in Belgorod region in Russia. In a few months, we will find out whether Russian ammo can explode because of the cold. The 5 main causes of sudden explosions in Russia are winter, spring, summer, autumn, and smoking. So a little bit of sass there coming from the Ukrainians, that's for sure. And I don't blame them a bit, but there has been some pretty major explosions of ammunition depots in the Belgorod Oblast. And that just further cripples the Russian capability of even launching any offenses because they can't supply their own forces. Their logistical lines are essentially completely collapsed at this point, as well as their command and control sector. And it's just turned into an absolute mess. It's a slog through the mud if you're trying to do anything and you're in Russia. However, that doesn't mean that Russia still isn't hitting back and hitting hard, and that's because we know here, coming out of Kharkiv, as of the 17th of August, there was a pretty big strike on Kharkiv. At least 6 people were killed and an additional 16 wounded after a Russian ballistic missile, likely fired from Belgorod itself, hit Kharkiv and hit some residential complexes, completely collapsing them, or at least partially collapsing them, and starting some major fires. At this point, we really don't know of any updates regarding the dead and the wounded. This is from the initial reporting, and this is once again coming from the Defense Ministry of Ukraine, which is, of course, their official military Twitter. So we can go ahead and take a look at that here.
Один 200-й уже есть. Пожар еще. Дом вот полностью разрушен. По людям не понимаем сколько. Ось вимкнули пожежники світло. Повністю вщент розрушена будівля. 1200, 1300 наразі. Свідки кажуть, що людей в гуртожитку було дуже багато.
Now, unfortunately, a lot of pain and suffering ongoing there in Kharkiv at this hour, as families are currently mourning and surgeons are trying their best to save the lives of those that were wounded and buried underneath the rubble. The thing is that Kharkiv is continuing to be a target despite having no tactical or strategic advantage at this point in the war. Russia is not capable of launching any major ground campaigns against Kharkiv at this stage. They were pushed back so far that their standard artillery systems, the BM-21 Grad, the DPK-30s, their 2S1s, 2S3 batteries, none of this can actually hit Kharkiv itself. So they're relying on Iskander-M missile batteries, and even now more so, S-300 and S-400 missile batteries. While originally intended for anti-air defense systems, the thing is that those have now been converted in limited quantities to being able to be ad hoc versions of ballistic missiles. So they are converted, at least partially. While highly inaccurate, they're being used against surface targets now instead of their intended use as anti-air weaponry. All of which being fired from the Belgorod Oblast, which is within Russia itself. And demining does continue. The thing is that Ukraine is littered with munitions. There is just a ton of stuff. Both sides of this war have fired an ungodly amount of artillery at each other and have used everything, landmines. We've seen, incendiary munitions. We've seen cluster munitions being used. We've seen all of it in this war. It's been quite gruesome and quite horrifying, to be fairly honest. And the thing is that the landscape is going to be littered with this for decades to come. Once again, a war like this has not been fought in 80 years, and even then, the closest comparison I could make regarding the war in Ukraine would be to World War I, more so than World War II or any other conventional war fought in Europe. The reason being is the massive amounts of uses of static defensive lines, such as trench networks and other things such as artillery. Much more reminiscent of the Battle of the Somme than it is to than it really is to any other war in history. And that's really the important thing here. So demining has to continue. Demining has to continue for decades. It's a danger to the population. This is something that will kill farmers and children and things for decades to come. In fact, there are areas in other parts of Europe, including France most certainly, in areas such as Verdun and in the Somme, where millions of shells were fired in nothing but just a few days. And what ended up happening is these areas are so littered with unexploded ordnance, and that's too dangerous even for bomb crews to go into them. So places such as in the Ardennes forest, there are entire sections that are blocked off and inaccessible by anybody because it's simply too dangerous, too hazardous for even professionals to go through and get that. But American volunteers and of course the EOD teams across Ukraine, of course our lovely Patron, my most favorite dog on the planet at this point, aside from my own, that is. And that is that American. So they are going through and they're trying to demine these areas. They're going through with they're going through with mine detectors and everything else, and they're trying to demine and trying to clear out these areas and try to make it safe just for the public in general, and so that way that people aren't dying from these things, decades to come. And we can go ahead to see an update from one of the American volunteers here.
All right, guys. Well, guess today's gonna have to come to a stop. Convoy of Ukrainian military vehicles pulled up and kind of wanted to know what I was doing out in the middle of a field. So thankfully, I had the local commander. I had the radio with him, so he came out, and by the time the discussion was over with, apparently there's too many disarmed landmines, TM62 mines, just hanging out alongside the road, and they can't really keep up with how many mines we're pulling. So, but yeah, so I'm gonna call it a day, especially since they're a bunch of guys with guns and I don't speak the language. So yeah, it's a good day. But for myself, one man show out here today, I was able to haul in 30. So it's not really the number I was looking for. I was looking to keep going. I'm on a good line right now. But again, when I guess he is the area commander, and he basically said we need to stop right now until we can kind of get a handle on all the mines that are just hanging out alongside the road. So I definitely understand it. Definitely do. Hopefully I get the go ahead tomorrow, and we'll keep removing mines. But appreciate everything, all the donations. It's awesome, and it's going to a good cause. We're pulling a lot of mines. We're at about 350 now. So, but yeah, I'll keep everybody updated and let you know tomorrow.
So fantastic news coming from him. I mean, fantastic to see that they're pulling so many landmines out of the ground. Once again, these are just mines. You got to think, during the early part of the war, the Rasputitsa mud, all of those grad rockets, they're dumbfire rockets, and how they work is when they hit something, it basically crushes the detonator in the front, and that's what sets it off. Well, Rasputitsa mud is very thick and it's very soft. And so anytime that those rockets ended up hitting just the right spot in the Rasputitsa mud, it just sank. It didn't bother exploding or anything else. This makes that EOD efforts extremely, extremely slow. There's such a wide area that has to be covered. And I'm not just talking about on land, but things in the water too. We've seen Ukrainian EOD divers going down and clearing out munitions that have sunk into the water and are currently just laying at the bottom, posing a hazard to anyone who bothers to go swimming or fishing within any of these rivers or lakes or anything else within this region. It's absolutely disastrous, and it's something that will affect Ukraine, honestly, for generations to come. But we start rolling down here into the Donbass, and this is the meat and potatoes of the war. This is where the war is happening. This is where the main fighting is ongoing. And we start off with something that is obviously still more tragic than it is uplifting. Don't worry, there's a lot more uplifting news as we continue, but the fact is that Slavyansk still lies along a major axis of advance for Russian forces. While there hasn't been a major ground campaign in the area, we have seen major ground campaigns against areas such as Bakhmut and Soledar, and places or even as far south as Toretsk. And what we're seeing is that Slavyansk continues to receive major amounts of shelling. You can break up Russian doctrine really into two different phases. The first phase is a precursor shelling bombardment. They use a massive amount of artillery, and the tactics really haven't changed since the end of World War II. In fact, they were further developed upon by the Soviet Union throughout the entirety of the Cold War, and of course that transitioned into the Russian army that we see and know today. You see this tactic being used heavily in places such as the Battle of Grozny, even in modern day, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, as Russia continued to consolidate its power. The immense amount of artillery usage, and then Russia actually does not have any light infantry units. 100% of their army is completely mechanized. It's either mechanized or motorized. Nobody's walking. They don't maintain any light infantry, and that's why you see so many armored vehicles operating independently without infantry support. It's disastrous when you're talking about tactically, and that is something that's really playing into the Ukrainian handbook, but it is smart if you're trying to exploit gaps and conduct maneuver warfare. So far, we haven't seen very many successes with that, other than just quite literally letting loose the Russian horde and taking over a location just by sheer number alone. Places such as Severodonetsk, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, and Mariupol, which was pummeled into dust. But Slavyansk is currently moving that direction as well, as it is being pummeled to dust by Russian artillery bombardments, not just from standard systems on the ground, but air power as well. Go ahead and take a look. This is coming from Pavel Krylenko. Pavel Krylenko is the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. He is the area commander.
Практично перманентно вони постійно щось прилітає сюди. Інколи буває година затища, інколи буває так, що півдня постійно щось летить. Це авіабомба, ми так рахували, що це напевно півтонна. Лінії зіткнення не так уже далеко, їхні літаки підлітають практично під лінію зіткнення і запускають сюди і ракети, і авіабомби. Противник дуже давно вже відкриває вогонь по Сіверську для того, щоб зруйнувати всю інфраструктуру міста, для того, щоб в подальшому, так як вони думають собі і так як вони хочуть, було менше вуличних боїв. Для того вони руйнують всю інфраструктуру міста, знищують, і тим самим вони ще хочуть, щоб як можна менше людей залишилося в місті. Противник постійно хоче покращити своє тактичне положення, але в нього нічого не виходить. Вони кількістю беруть і, ви бачите, вони руйнують просто-напросто будинки. В нас іде на якість, на враження ворога, противника. А в них куди попало і вони починають лупити.
So you obviously see a lot of work ongoing here inside of Ukraine, and a lot of stuff happening, especially in this area. What we're expecting right now is that at some point this precursor bombardment is going to lift, and that may be dependent on other successes in areas of the front, such as, once again, Bakhmut, Soledar, Seversk as well, which we believe is actually is a supporting effort more than a main effort. But Slavyansk lies in the way of Kramatorsk, and the thing is that there are major logistical lines that run between in this area. So you're talking about places. Kramatorsk is a major hub of activity. It's a perfect command and control center. It's a large city with a major railhead, which is great for bringing in supplies for Ukraine. Taking it cuts off those supplies really into a large area of Donetsk and the Donbass. You also are talking about it has a lot of major roadways that run either near or through it. So you're talking about anything that you can cut off ground support with. There's several different avenues the Russians can take in taking these areas, but all roads must lead through Slavyansk and Kramatorsk if you're looking to capture the Donetsk Oblast. It would be a large-scale encirclement movement trapping a ton of Ukrainian troops within this northern pocket. Now, with that little bit of depressing news over, we can start getting into why I titled this, That's a Lot of Damage. Now, it is a lot of damage. The Ukrainians have done immense work with their HIMARS and Mars 270 systems, also known as the Mars 2s, and they are just destroying Russian logistics and command and control sectors. I can't describe the amount of destruction that I've seen today of Russian logistics command and control sectors. In fact, that's probably about 50% of today. It is completely, it's insane. First of all, the SBU, which is with the former SBU building inside of Lysychansk, was being used as a headquarters. This came in on August the 16th. Is being used as a Russian headquarters immediately following the occupation of Lysychansk, and Ukrainian forces destroyed it. I mean, they leveled that. Anything and everything inside that building is destroyed. The building is gone. It's been wiped off the face of the earth. And that's no longer a field headquarters that's viable for the Russian Federation. We don't know about any statistics regarding dead and wounded out of this strike, but it's even worse than the one that we saw in Popasna, and that was pretty significant. But we can go ahead and take a look here. The Russians got destroyed. I mean, there's just nothing left. There's nothing left. It's insane. And that's not the only one. In fact, the destruction that the Ukrainians have, the HIMARS and Mars 2 changed the war. Hands down, changed the war. The Javelin, amazing against tanks, but the Mars 2 and the HIMARS systems are just annihilating Russia's ability to wage a war. You need command and control. Someone has to tell you where to go. You have to get supply. So all of those ammunition depots, logistical depots, fuel hubs, all of that stuff is getting destroyed at an insane rate by the Ukrainians. We jump over here. It's another ammunition depot destroyed. This time, this is at Lodikove, which is in the Luhansk Oblast. This Russian ammunition depot was destroyed on the 19th of August, so not but a few days ago, and it's gone. It's gone. There is no other way to describe it. Take a look. So that's gone. That's been destroyed. And then we jump down here. This is Horlivka. This happened on the 21st. This ammunition depot's gone too. Let's see if I can line it up here. And we continue down here. This is just outside Donetsk, where a Russian FOB, or a Russian forward operating base, was destroyed. And They hit it with more artillery, of course, further disrupts logistics, command and control, communications, the stuff that you need to actually conduct offensive operations like Russia is trying to, and failing quite significantly at. They are not doing very well whatsoever in any front, and that's what we see here. Go ahead and take a look at this. So fantastic! They yet another one destroyed, and we just continue down the whole line. It just kind of just continues, and it rolls into Russia too. But we do take a stop from the destruction of ammunition depots because there has been a couple of other developments too. And the first one, of course, is out of Mariupol. Mariupol, roughly 22,000 civilians as of right now. Those are the best estimates. But roughly 22,000 civilians of the city were killed when the Russians attacked the city, encircled it, and quite literally destroyed it. Mariupol, for all intents and purposes, does not exist. It has been destroyed. 90% of all of the infrastructure in the city is so completely destroyed that if it hasn't already collapsed, it will have to be demolished. It is hell on earth, and there is no other way to describe it. Mariupol is hell. To have died in the Battle of Mariupol was merciful, because to have survived, I think there is no worse fate than living in Mariupol right now. It is absolutely indescribable to you, the absolute terror of what is happening in the city. But what we do see is that they are using mass graves because there's simply no better way to bury what's left of the dead inside of this city. We get a look at just one of the mass grave sites. We have identified either 3 or 4 at this point through Maxar satellite footage, all of which have roughly doubled in size since the last time we reported on that. This one location holds roughly 3,000 dead Ukrainian citizens who were killed here in the Battle of Mariupol. We actually now get a nice up-close video of the grave site itself. Take a look. It's almost 2 full minutes. One gravesite, just parts of it, takes 2 full minutes. Minute and 56 seconds. Just one of several. The loss of life in Mariupol is something that is almost impossible to quantify. The suffering is definitely impossible to even comprehend. The level of destruction in this war is something that I think is very understated. Everyone talks about the highlights. Everyone talks about, the HIMARS strikes that, destroy the Antonovsky Bridge. Everyone talks about how terrible Mariupol was. Everyone talks about Rubizny and Lysychansk. I've seen entire villages in Syria flattened, and the only thing standing was the mosque. that's the fact of reality of modern warfare. The amount of destruction is incomprehensible. This war far surpasses that. The destruction in this war is incomprehensible to me. It's, if you are a fellow veteran and fought in the war on terror, and then it's far different from anything you have witnessed or witness to, and it's terrible. I can't describe it. It is so horrific. The destruction is so just, it's there are no words to describe it. So there's been a couple comments that have come in, and so one is from Zachron D. Grissom, David A. And I'm sorry if I butcher your guys' names and stuff. I have terrible pronunciation. I butcher all the names on this channel. I am so sorry. But Zachron D. Grissom, David A. says, last I had seen was numbers 100,000 to 150,000 or so trapped in the city months back. I don't know for sure. Trying to get information out of Mariupol is really difficult. It was difficult during the war. It was difficult before the encirclement. It was much more difficult after. And it was a lot of fragmentary information, not any of which we can independently verify. And that's something that we try to do here on the channel, is independently verify everything we have. We do know that the population of Mariupol, a lot of them did end up fleeing, especially as the Russians quickly encroached on the city of Mariupol and as troops moved in to defend it. We also know that many attempted to escape through humanitarian corridors, which were, of course, shelled by the Russians. And we do know that many were also still trapped in the city, and many buried alive in their very own basements that they were using for bomb shelters. It was a terrible situation. It still is a terrible situation. The water is absolutely contaminated. There isn't really any humanitarian aid. There is no medicine. People are dying because they can't get their medications. If you have diabetes, it's pretty much a death sentence if you're in Mariupol. Amputations, for instance, that's a way to treat diabetes, at least in the short term, is to amputate, usually starting with the legs. Well, there is no anesthesia. There is no painkillers. There is nothing. There aren't even any hospitals. They're bombed. There is nothing. So you're probably going to have to get your leg amputated in, like, I don't know, whatever's left of the doctor's house, basically Civil War style, and you're probably going to get an infection and die. And if you don't get the amputation, the diabetes itself is going to kill you because you're not getting your insulin shots. It's terrible. Let's Get Steve says, hi guys, been a while, glad you're back. Thank you. I'm happy to be back. It's fantastic to finally be back. Been a very stressful last week and a half, but thank you very much. Aravis Ching says, there were more, and then there were reports about people getting lack of medicines and folk couldn't get treatment. That's still the case there. And most of your water's contaminated. They're still not done clearing Mariupol. There are people still rotting into puddles on the ground. And all of that is draining into the streets. There is no sanitation. There's no running water, no electricity, no gas, no sanitation. There's nothing. There's no food. There's no medicine. There is quite literally nothing in Mariupol. It is nothing. It's just hell. It's just hell. It's the 8th layer of hell. Let's see here. Once again, Zachron D. Grissom says, scorched earth advanced the Russian method. Pretty much. That's pretty much exactly what they're doing. And then he later goes on and states genocide, maybe, as a word to describe it. Yes, actually. I have equated it to that before, and I do stand by that. For those that don't know, we try to stay apolitical and we try to stay unbiased. But for Ukraine, that's just impossible. You can't look every day. Keep in mind, as a viewer, you see roughly 10 to 25% of what we actually are seeing, because a lot of it is just too horrific and too graphic or anything to show here on this channel. It just isn't. And it's not something I think is necessary to show to really help you understand the gravity of the situation. There are very few times where I think that that level of graphicness is necessary to convey that point. And the brutality of what's happening here. I think that's understandable by the human being just by seeing the immense. People aren't used to seeing entire cities gone anymore. That was from days gone, days of the past, and it's not now. That's exactly what's happening. And it's a genocide done poorly, I think, is what Ukraine is. It's a genocide done poorly. You have all of the factors to actually go into this and talk about it. You have all those factors to talk about, is this genocide, is it not? Under the Rome Statute, the Russians really seem to take the legal definitions of ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, and genocide, and instead of using them to define their rules of engagement, and minimize things, they're using them as a checklist. And that's terrifying, to think that an entire country is willing to do that, and willfully do that. Now, there's been, I have had this question in the past, and I think it's something worth, worth talking about for a few seconds, and that is that the question was, and I'm sorry, I cannot remember who asked this, but is it being ordered? Is this something that the Russians, the commanders on the ground, are ordering their troops to rape and pillage and murder and destroy? And, to an extent, yes, especially when you're talking about the destruction within the offensives themselves, and hey, you're going to go take this objective by any means necessary. That level of indiscriminate attack is 100% something that is ordered. But in the wide range of things, no, it's not ordered. In fact, it's the complete opposite, is what I believe, is that instead of being ordered, it's a lack of orders. It's a lack of rules of engagement. There isn't really any. It's a free fire zone. Ukraine is a free fire zone for the Russians. If it moves, kill it. That's pretty much the ideology. There isn't any disciplinary actions being taken. There isn't any serious investigations into war crimes being taken or ongoing. There aren't, resignations from commanders or punishments or non-judicial punishments, NJPs. There's none of that is happening. There aren't any defined rules of engagement for Russian troops. There are no safety briefings. There are no anything. It's a lack of rules of engagement. It's a lack of guidance and a lack of information and guidelines that the Russians are being given. And so that broadness of what's happening, of what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. And you saw the rules of engagement pretty early on with the Russians. The one Russian soldier, for instance, with the babushka, who was saying, remember to fill your pockets, so with sunflower seeds, so that way they'll sprout out of your body in the spring and that kind of stuff. That was the rules of engagement. You see that. You see them very early on in the war, the rules of engagements, they're using non-lethal, they're using sirens, they're not trying to run over people, they're being very calm with the civilian population. That went out the window almost immediately. And that's what we see now is the lack of those rules of engagement. And that's really what the perpetration is. That's what's allowing these things to happen. And one of those war crimes is actually coming here from one of the areas in the Donbass, and that is the fact that incendiary munitions are being used against personnel. We've talked about this quite extensively before, but it's worth hitting on again. And I actually brought up the rule number 85 of the customary international humanitarian law in order to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Under the ICRC database, or also known as the International Committee of the Red Cross or the Red Crescent, under their database, rule number 85 of customary international humanitarian law is that you cannot use incendiary munitions against infantry. You cannot use them against personnel. They're only meant to be used against things like logistical depots. Ammunition depots, you can use them against those. You can use them against fuel depots. You can't use them in highly concentrated civilian populations. That breaks Protocol 3 of the Geneva Conventions, adopted in 1980. And you also cannot use them against personnel alone, meaning infantry. Even in certain circumstances, it's very clearly defined. And so we can actually take a look at this. This is the use of, this is against Ukrainian troops in their trenches here in the Donbass, and this is the incendiary munitions. These appear to be thermite more than phosphorus, and white phosphorus kind of has different uses, mostly used as a flare. This appears to be air bursted thermite, which kind of works a little bit differently, but we can go ahead and take a look. Now, normally you won't see, once again, white phosphorus, which is another very commonly used incendiary munition, can be air bursted, but however, most of the time white phosphorus is produced into utilization as a flare round, so you're not going to see a wide burst like that. You're usually going to see it pretty concentrated, and we've seen it used like that in other places as well, more specifically by American forces that conducted war crimes inside of Iraq and inside of Afghanistan during those two wars. But why is it a war crime? Well, once again, rule number 85 of the customary international humanitarian law. Rule number 85 is that the anti-personnel use of incendiary weapons is prohibited unless it is not feasible to use a less harmful weapon to render a person hors de combat. Hors de combat means no longer a combatant. Wounded, surrendered, that is what hors de combat means. So, once again, if this is near a populated area, which it usually is, then that also breaks Protocol 3 of the Geneva Conventions, which means that you cannot use incendiary munitions in highly concentrated civilian populations. We've seen the Russians do this before. In fact, they broadcasted it live on international television through their state-run media sites and used as propaganda when they dropped it on the Azovstal at the very end of the Battle of Mariupol. And yeah, that's in a concentrated population zone. Mariupol's a pretty big city. You can't do that. That's illegal. Like, that's against the laws of war. One of the signatories being Russia. So that's a thing. Over here in Enhadar has been a very common or a very well talked about location in the last couple of weeks. The reason being is for the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants, also known as the ZNPP. And the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is one of the largest in Europe. It would be a catastrophe that if something were to happen to the nuclear reactors there, the catastrophe could basically envelop most of Europe. Ukraine would be completely contaminated as a country with radioactivity. It would make Chernobyl look like a child's play. That is the level of destruction that just damaging the nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia would cause. It would be unprecedented in its scale of destruction. People compare it to Chernobyl. People compare it to Fukushima Daiichi, which is in Japan, that was hit by the tsunami. No, do not compare it to those. You could combine those and it wouldn't nearly be as bad as what would happen if something happened to this power plant. And the thing is that the Russians have repeatedly stated that they are not using it as a military compound. We heard very early on rumors from people inside of Enhadar, including members of the staff there at the nuclear facility, stating that the Russian Federation was actually setting up artillery positions there at the power plant. We did see one Ukrainian strike, which we can fairly claim as being considered an actual Ukrainian strike, using kamikaze drones, most likely, of course, those switchblades, to actually target personnel there at the power plant just outside of the facility's main walls. We do know that since those rumors came out, Nikopol, which is just across the Dnipro River, has received an extensive amount of shelling as a result, and most likely coming from Enhadar. There's been several things that have been chalked up to false flag incidents regarding this, where shells have impacted this location. However, the report from the weapon system could be heard within about 3 seconds, meaning that, or with the actual impact of the weapon system of the round landing about 3 seconds after the initial report of the weapon, meaning that that is likely being fired within 1 kilometer. Of course, there are no Ukrainian troops within 1 kilometer of the Enerhodar nuclear facility. And so we can safely say that the Russians are doing this. They also say they aren't using it as a military facility. We've seen drone footage of that, and we have even more because we actually have something from somebody inside the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant where they're actually storing their vehicles next to the the reactor engine room. Smart guys, very, very intelligent. They're hidden inside of the facility itself. The facility, nuclear power plants, pretty much all concrete, very heavy duty. They're meant to survive a lot of different things, including, to an extent, war. They're specifically planned just to be able to withstand any damage it may take that could put the reactor in some kind of a critical state. But just take a look at this. We have 2 different videos. These are coming from the engine room inside of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Take a look. So this is coming from that video. You can see where they're walking around there. And look at that. Clearly marked. Thank you, Russia, for clearly marking your vehicles so we can identify them inside the power plant. Well then, isn't that just fantastic to see? Of course, we get more random shelling as things are currently going on here at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, because once again, Russia is pretty much trying to false flag this. Now, is there definitive? Do we have like Russian orders saying so? No, we don't. But there's a lot of evidence to back it. We've seen 2S7, we've seen 2S7, 203 millimeter artillery guns. Peons is what they're called, being brought in over to Vodion, which is right next to there, and that actually puts them within minimum firing range of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We've seen a number of explosions, a lot of mortar rounds hitting this location, reportedly fired within about 1 kilometer if you go by the speed of sound, which puts it at 2.9 seconds for it to travel 1 kilometer. And we see that there. We've seen the audio from that, where you can clearly hear the report of the weapon system, and then immediately following that with an explosion, which once again highly suggests that the Russians are doing this themselves. The evidence is building, and before any of this kicked off, we even reported here where the reports were that Russia was bringing in troops into this area and using it as a military facility and as an artillery staging location to fire from. So there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of evidence that all leads into this, even going back over a month at this point. So it's pretty significant, pretty damning on the part of the Russians. And it only continues to build. Evidence only continues to mount. But once again, it says we have shelling here at the Enerhodar nuclear facility.
Так, вот только что обстреляли гидроэлектростанцию, буквально на моих глазах. Какой-то происходит пиздец, извиняюсь за выражение. Кого-то, по-моему, убило только что. Мужчину убило. Пиздец. Так, по-моему, надо очень быстро сваливать. тебе Энергодар.
Once again, we got some photos here regarding the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Yeah, so it's not good, to say the least. Reuters has been talking about, of course, the IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Administration, that covers. They said that they would, or that they could be doing a Russian-held visit to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the coming days. Of course, the United Nations has also weighed in on that topic rather heavily, and the fact of the matter is that I don't think that the Russians are going to be listening. We can go back to a little bit of good news, though, and that's because we have two things coming out of Novokakhovka. Novokakhovka has received a lot of damage in the last couple of days. So the first thing is that on the 17th, a Russian headquarters was destroyed. So this is our field headquarters destroyed, most likely by HIMARS here, just because of the precision of the strikes. And once again, disrupts the command and control infrastructure of the Russian Federation. If you don't have the command to attack, then you probably aren't going to attack. The Russian Federation relies pretty heavily on their chain of command structure, and less slow on the initiative of commanders there on the ground. Pretty much think, if you're thinking the Russians, think the United States doctrine, but backwards. The United States puts a lot of emphasis on initiative and in personal judgment in taking objectives and determining things. Otherwise, you wouldn't have things like the Battle of 73 Easting, where that was actually the commander there on the ground making that determination to go past his actual phase line. But the Russians are pretty much backwards on that. They're very heavily reliant on their chain of command. They're very heavily reliant on orders. They're very strict to orders, and there's just not a lot that the Russians will deviate from. And you're also seeing just how they use things. They put tanks in front of the really squishy guys when really you should be putting the squishy guys up front and supporting them with tanks. And you see that with massive amounts of armor losses. And you see that with basically their ideology. The United States would ask, are there going to be civilian casualties? The Russians ask if there's a military target there. Pretty backwards when it comes to most military doctrines throughout the world, and that's pretty much how we see it here. But we can go ahead and take a look at this strike.
Вот все, что осталось от нашей хаты. А вдалеке все, что осталось от связистов. Вход. И вот там.
I don't think that's going to be a viable field command post in the future. And I mean, the level of destruction is just insane. I mean, once again, that building's gone. And once again, that adds more vitality to the Olenivka thing, is that the Russians had to have done it because we can already see that if HIMARS wants to kill something, it's going to be gone. And there's not going to be a whole lot left. Olenivka had a lot left. So we know the Russians did that one. Yeah, learn from that one, Steven Seagal. Maybe do some research, man. Your movies would probably suck less, too. I mean, absolutely just destroyed, you know, whatever the Russians had there. It's not the only thing. An ammunition depot has been struck here in Novokakhovka, and it was reportedly destroyed this morning. And we can actually see some of that here.
Вот так вот прилетело у нас. Красиво. Походу в яблочко.
I do not eat that many crayons, guys. And yes, the blue ones are my favorite. Okay? They're my favorite. They'll always be my favorite. Demise FPS says saltpeter again. So for those that for those that don't know, when there's a huge blast in Novokakhovka a couple weeks ago, and it was huge. There's a lot of ammunition there. The Ukrainians targeted an S-300, S-400 artillery battery storage depot inside of Novokakhovka. And the Russians said that the Ukrainians blew up a ton of saltpeter. Saltpeter is a type of it's a type of fertilizer. But the issue is that it's not explosive. In order to become an explosive, it has to have a reducing agent. And you usually don't store the two together. So we know that that is probably not the case. Saltpeter isn't explosive by itself, and that's why it was developed. Saltpeter was developed because ammonium nitrate, one of the most heavily used fertilizers in the world, is very explosive. In fact, insurgents use it to create homemade explosives for their IEDs over in the Middle East. So that's the major thing. That's why it's so controlled, ammonium nitrate is. They later rephrased that to ammonium nitrate after they realized their pretty grave error in what they were naming it. But we saw the aftermath as well, and it was a lot of 152 millimeter cases of saltpeter that they had laying around. Awkwardly enough, 152 millimeter is also their shell casing round for their artillery systems. So that's kind of awkward that you would store, I don't know, I get dual purpose, I think is what they call that when it comes to international trade, is dual purpose parts and trading equipment. So, pretty, yeah. Needless to say, it's a lot of saltpeter. You can see the nice, yeah, that nice big plume of smoke there. Yeah, that's what we like to see. That's not the only thing. Chernobevka over here. Once again, I'm pretty sure this is the Kherson International Airport again. I don't know. This commander or commanders, because I'm sure the last one got killed. But every single field commander that comes into the Kherson area takes a look at the Kherson International Airport and goes, you know what? It'd be great if we use that as a logistical hub and as a headquarters, because they just keep putting stuff there. And they keep getting blown up every single time. And then, of course, that kills that guy. And so the next guy comes in and goes, you know what would be a great idea? One of the definitions of insanity, and this is the most commonly phrased one, is that one of the definitions of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. The Russians keep doing that with the Kherson International Airport over by Chernobevka. They do. They just keep putting stuff there and thinking it's not going to get bombed by the Ukrainians, and it does every single time without failure. Without failure. And the Ukrainians have even more accurate weapon systems, and they're doing just fine with their inaccurate ones earlier on in the war. So, once again, coming out of Chernobevka, Kherson International Airport on fire, Russians getting blown up once again for, I think this is the 5th or 6th time now. Go ahead, take a look. So you can see the nice plumes of smoke. They just keep doing the same stuff over and over. It's mind-boggling. God, you know what? Don't change Russia. This is going to help you lose the war faster. Just go quietly into the night. No tears, only dreams now. And that allows us to jump down here into the into the Crimean Peninsula. The Crimean Peninsula has been a hub of activity over the last few days, and really since the last time that we came down here over by Saki, where we saw a huge explosion. And a huge strike. Now there's a lot of talk of whether or not that's a HIMARS strike, and I'm here to willing to end the debate for you, at least to the best of my knowledge. And to the best of my knowledge, it's not a HIMARS strike. A lot of people, talk about the ATACMS and stuff like that. A lot of information has come out from a lot of different sources saying it's not really an ATACMS pattern. Some of it's conflicting, some of it's not, and the thing is that Ukraine does have a domestic weapon system called the Grim 2, which they can use, and it does have enough range and enough accuracy. It's one of their newer weapon systems that can strike this deep into Crimea. So it's very viable that the Ukrainians were able to conduct a strike using the Grim 2, which we haven't seen yet in the war whatsoever, because they are so limited in number and quantity and munitions. So it's possible. And so I don't believe it's been a HIMARS strike. A lot of people say it hasn't been a HIMARS strike. A lot of experts are saying it's not HIMARS. The U.S. says that they didn't send the ATACMS to them, which I believe is pretty credible at this point, just because we would have seen the ATACMS being used much more, I think, if they had them. And that's the thing here. But we jump down here into Sevastopol, where we have a couple of different things. Sevastopol was hit on the 20th with a kamikaze drone. This actually attacked and ended up impacting the roof of a headquarters there and along the port here in Sevastopol. It was a Ukrainian strike, obviously. We do not know the variants. There are several different kamikaze drones that the Russians do have, or the Ukrainians, rather, have in their arsenal that they can use against the Russian Federation. The extent of the damage at this point is not known, nor is the casualties. In general, the destructive power of, say, a Switchblade is about that of a 40mm grenade. So it's not super huge. It's great against personnel, but not really against hardened targets. There are other variants. There are other things that they could be using that we just may not be aware of. We do know that there is a couple of different specialized drones, especially that the United States has come up with, that they have been sending Ukraine, that has been pretty kept well under wraps by both countries regarding their capabilities and what they actually do. But we can go ahead and take a look at this here. This is out of Sevastopol. Short, sweet, and to the point on that. And yeah, so we don't know the extent of the damage, but there has been a lot of activity regarding anti-air within the Crimean Peninsula. Since the latest strikes, the anti-air systems have really been up and going, especially in Sevastopol as well. We've seen pretty heavy amounts of anti-aircraft fire over the city on pretty much the last few nights, pretty much running anywhere from since the 19th through about the 21st. Those air defense systems have been running pretty heavily. We don't know if this is actually engaging Ukrainian targets or if this is more of a show of force thing, but we just don't know. And we don't know if Ukraine is trying to strike them this many times, because it's quite impressive display of firepower.
Это уже не смешно ходит.
Слушайте, собираемся,
Поехали
валим
нахуй,
отсюда.
Да. По тихой грусти нахуй. Вы что,
Отойдите с дороги, главное. Узкость. С дороги отойдите. Видел? Полетели обломки. Да. Ну, стали раньше сбивать. Сейчас даже. Опа. Есть. Молодцы. Ты видосик? Посолю. Честь незалежності.
Нормальные будут.
So these are a little bit more interesting as we get into these videos, and this is worth noting again, and I'm actually going to beat this tab real quick for you guys so I can kind of explain. What you're seeing here is you're seeing actual small arms. It's like a 23 millimeter cannon that's being fired into the air. It's air burst. The shells are set with a timer, and they air burst at a certain basically height level. And this is something that should be very telling about the Russian capability. The last time I saw this done in a large quantity, I was very, very young. And that would be back in 2003 at the beginning of the war in Iraq. The Iraqi army over Baghdad tried to provide a huge anti-aircraft shield against the American shock and awe campaign that was ongoing at the very early stages at the beginning of the Iraq War. The way they did this is they placed anti-aircraft guns, usually their ZSU-23 TAC-4s, and which is their mobile anti-aircraft platforms that they had at the time. It has quad-barrel 23 millimeter anti-aircraft guns, anti-aircraft cannons, and also there's the ZSU-23 TAC-2s, which are more stationary platforms or towable. And they put them up in quadrants. So Iraqi radar systems, those that were left anyway, were able to detect some American aircraft that were coming in over Iraq, and as they were getting ready to fly through an area, they would tell this, commander, open fire with your weapon systems at this height. They would set the fuses, and then they would fire them in a quadrant. It's just that quadrant. So that kilometer of our anti-aircraft guns would pepper the sky. And then the next quadrant would open up, and the next quadrant, and the next quadrant, and the next quadrant. And that's how they tried to blank the sky. It was very, very ineffective. And obviously the Iraq War, the actual war itself against the Saddam Hussein's army, did not last very long, and it did not effectively shoot down or damage very many American aircraft as a result. That is the very same idea as what you're seeing in this video as this is being fired into the air. That is what this is being used for, and that is the type of anti-air defense systems that the Russians are willing to put up. Now, is this the main effort? No. It's redundancy. And you need to understand it's a redundancy. This is if the missiles fail. This is if your S-300 systems fail, your SAM systems. But it is something that's very telling that could say the Russians can't fully rely on their missile systems, and or they lack enough missile systems to effectively cover the area. And we see further evidence of that here.
О, ПВО сработало, классно.
So once again, more and more anti-aircraft systems are being pushed into this area. I just look over into the chat and all I see is spam bots and something about corn. For those that don't know, I love corn. Sweet corn, corn on the cob, amazing stuff. You gotta make it right, but it's I love corn. Corn's an amazing food. It's quite literally the base of my food pyramid. Another ammunition depot ended up detonating here in Crimea. We don't know if it's a result of a Ukrainian strike or if it happened to be somebody, how would the Ukrainians put this, smoking. next to the ammunition. By the way, very hazardous for your health to do that. Anyway, this is in Maiskoy, which is there in southern Crimea. And it's very unclear if it's an accident or not at this point. But it's pretty hefty blast, to say the least. This would screw up your day. Anyone near this, their day's, well, it's not their problem anymore. We'll just put it like that.
Ебать. Стекай, с подвала слезь быстро, сейчас волна будет, нахуй. Слезь, сейчас волна дойдет до нас. Еще и стекла нахуй вылетят. Уйди.
Ох, бля, снаряд упал, бля.
Да?
Да? О, на дорогу.
Прям перед машиной причем. Да нихера не летает. Ебать, аж автобус шевелится.
If this is an oops, that's a huge oops. That's a big oops right there. That's a little bit more than a whoops. Man, that's not good for your health. That's pretty terrible for your health, actually.
Во двор зайти за провод. Никакого ни сообщения нету людям, да? Ничего.
Да всем до жопы, на.
Красоты, да, надо во двор зайти.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get Steve says, makes me wonder how many full trains worth of gear are going to the front just to be wiped out, or just to be wiped off the face of the earth. Well, we've posted a lot of the trains that have gone into here. A small fraction of them, to be sure, but a pretty good number to say the least. And it's kind of the Russians, as the Soviet Union, planned on fighting the world in a conventional war as well as a nuclear one. Russia even developed their logistics to operate in a nuclear contaminated environment. They have a huge stockpile. When the Soviet Union collapsed and the Russian Federation began, the Russian Federation went through their stockpiles and what they had on hand. They had artillery shells for artillery guns they hadn't had since the early 1900s. Still, the Russians are the hoarders of ammunition and equipment. Quite literally. They are hoarders of their stuff. And it's unfathomable. The destruction of the ammunition is quite significant when you're talking about the train loads that are coming in. But it's a very small fraction of any kind of stockpile that the Russians have. There's been a lot of talk, like, when is Russia going to run out of rockets? I hate to break it to you, but it will be decades. They can continue this rate of fire if they could supply their forces. They can continue the rate of fire that they are maintaining now for decades, on end, every single day for decades. It's insane how much ammunition that the Russian Federation has in its stockpile. The issue is, how logistics works doesn't exactly mean that you have to do a whole lot for it. What this means is to give you an idea, a basic rundown on how logistics works is we're going to go up here, we're going to go up into, let's go over here to Donetsk. It's the most concentrated area to do it in. Okay, and we're gonna go over here and see this is over here in Shakti. Shakti is over here towards the border, right? And everything's all hunky dory. Russian trains coming down here into Rostov-on-Don or over here to Shakti, and then from there they got offloaded. They're gonna get flatbedded on these nice big trucks, including their tanks. Are gonna get flatbedded on these nice big trucks with a flatbed trailer, and they're gonna take them all the way over, and we're gonna drop them in, say, Krishnali. And then from Krishnali, they're gonna maybe flatbed those trucks from, those trucks are gonna go back to Shakti, and then then they're gonna get loaded onto other trucks in Krishnali and taken to Shakhtarsk. And then from Shakhtarsk, they're gonna get taken to Donetsk or Makivka, and then into Donetsk on another set of trucks. And then they're gonna get sent from Donetsk to, I don't know, let's find an easier one to pronounce. Horlivka. They'll get sent to Horlivka and then up to Shumi. Or from Horlivka, they'll go over to Toretsk or to Bakhmut or into Soledar. You're offloading and you're loading and unloading it a lot is the point. But each of those trips, those trucks are making shorter and shorter runs. Because all of the trucks in Horlivka are dedicated to just running to Bakhmut and supplying the troops there. That's all they're doing. They can make more trips a day. They're going to burn less fuel doing it. It's going to take them less time, and all they got to do is pull from the stockpile in Horlivka, because they don't have to worry about stocking Horlivka. Donetsk has to worry about stocking Horlivka, and Donetsk has to have to worry about their stockpile because it's coming from Makivka. Makivka doesn't care because it's coming from Shakhtarsk. And each of these trips, they're carrying more and more ammunition, burning less and less fuel, have less and less breakdowns. But as Horlivka gets destroyed, and then Donetsk gets destroyed, as those ammo depots are destroyed, now Makivka has to go all the way to Horlivka, or all the way from Makivka all the way to the front line. It's a much longer trip. They can carry less fuel, or they can carry less ammunition. They're burning more fuel, and they're more prone to breakdown, and they're more prone to attack. Every single ammunition depot you see across this entire front line is lengthening the amount of logistics that has to be done. Those trips are now going to happen less frequently, which means your troops are going to get ammunition less frequently. It's going to take longer for them to do those trips. You're doubling the amount of mileage in many cases that they have to take, and it's a war zone. You're not flying down a highway at 90 miles an hour. These things are creeping along in a war zone where these roads are half destroyed. They are flooding, they're flooded over. The bridges are out. Things are terrible if you are trying to logistically, it's a nightmare. The Russian Federation didn't have logistical capabilities to start the war. They start the war with about 15 battalion tactical groups. That requires about 6,000 logistical vehicles to support. Russia only had about 4,300 in active service. So they didn't have the logistical capabilities to start with. You see the immediate repercussions of that as the Russian logistic lines completely bogged down, including that 40-mile long convoy. The corruption within the government leading up into the war did not help. The Russians may have great stockpiles, but great stockpiles doesn't help if you can't get it to your troops. You can win a battle with just the ammunition you have on hand, but you can't survive the counterattack if you don't have anything to fight back with, and that's what the Russians are running into. They can fire 10 times more artillery than the Ukrainians can, but if they don't have the artillery shells to shoot, it doesn't matter. As we jump back down here, we get another ominous message from the Ukrainian armed forces. So once again, from their official Twitter, this has turned into the Wendy's, the sarcastic Wendy's, and that is their official Twitter essentially now. It is hilarious. And the Russians, when the strike on Crimea occurred, one of the things that got brought up pretty heavily was especially by the Russians, it must have been HIMARS that were floating offshore. Well, HIMARS are a land vehicle to start with. They would be a very stable firing platform if it was offshore, but the Ukrainians have run with it, and they have given us this. This is regarding the Kerch Bridge. This is the Kerch Strait, and also known as the Crimean Bridge. And that has been talked about heavily about whether or not Ukraine would actually hit it with a strike. And it seems that Ukraine has a response to it.
You have any regrets?
No, don't have time to regret.
You have any regrets?
Nice. Fantastic memes. Fantastic. Once again, this is an official government agency. You can see it right there. Ukrainian government organization. Twitter's verified them. Like, we verified them. You know, this is the Defense of Ukraine. This is their official Twitter for the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. And this is the stuff they're posting. They are absolutely hilarious. It's just continual posts like this. I mean, just continual posts. It's hilarious. Kerch Bridge. You know, here's a great one. So this is a Russian tourist, and he took a picture of himself next to these missile batteries. This is in Crimea. And the Defense Ministry of Ukraine says, maybe we're being too hard on Russian tourists. Sometimes they can be really helpful. Like this man taking pictures of Russian air defense positions near Yevpatoria in occupied Crimea. Thank you and keep up the good work. It is Savage Wendy's, but on Ukrainian style. It's hilarious. Aramis Shang asks, how did they make it? I would normally say Hollywood, magic, but Ukraine doesn't have Hollywood, so we're just gonna say magic, because that's pretty much how they've pulled this entire war off. Is just magic and quite a significant amount of tenacity. But we end our Ukraine segment on a somber note, and that is because once again the village of Zatoka, which is here in the Odessa Oblast, was hit with a missile. This happened on the 17th. A Russian missile, likely being fired by the Black Sea Fleet, ended up impacting a residential area. They destroyed and damaged several homes and started a major fire. Casualties we don't know at this time, but this was reported by Ilya Ponomarenko, who is an independent reporter with the Kyiv Independent. So go ahead and take a look. Once again, this is how Russia fights its wars. The amount of destruction is just incomprehensible. And it mostly affects the civilian population. It's not accurate. It's not any of that. It's just scorched earth. But that actually wraps up the entirety of the Ukraine itself segment, at least inside of the country. We have plenty of other news outside of the country, though, and that includes regarding the war, including several major developments in areas such as Russia. And, of course, we continue on the streak of that's a lot of damage, because Belgorod has received quite a bit of damage. And we see that here. So, another Russian ammunition depot reportedly caught fire near Belgorod on the 18th, and it's unclear as to whether or not this one was a Ukrainian strike or if it was just happened to be an accident. Belgorod, it was no stranger to a deep strike by Ukrainian forces, including the usage of helicopters inside of the Belgorod Oblast, as we saw Ukrainian pilots flying their Mi-24s into Belgorod and getting some work done there. So what we see here is quite a significant incident. Take a look.
Охереть.
Блять, все, я все проебала.
that one continues on. And by the way, if you want to go back through and look at any of these, our official website's actually in the description, and you can go through. We actually post the map every single day before the stream, so you guys can follow along if you want on the points, or you can actually go back through and check out more information on this stuff, or you can look at the videos once again yourselves too. So just as a little bit of a tidbit there, but we continue on.
Ебать хуярит, братан. Бля, оно в дорогу вылетело.
Pretty sweet to see. And Belgorod actually had 2 incidents, as the latest one here. Once again, coming from the 18th, another ammunition depot appears to have caught fire. And this is in Starya Skol, which is in kind of the northeastern part of the Belgorod Oblast. It seems to have caught fire and was also destroyed. We can take a look at that too. I love how even the firefighters are like, nope, not worth it. But as we jump up to Moscow, there's been a very interesting development, and it's quite concerning, but there's been a couple of interesting things that have happened over the last about 48 hours. And that is that Dugin, or Dugin's daughter, Daria Dugina, who Dugin is a very he's a very big propagandist. He's a leading figure, and he's within Putin's inner circle, and it is that he is one of the lead people regarding things such as his Putinism is the best way to put it. So on August 20th, so today was the funeral for Dugin's daughter. She was killed in a targeted car explosion. There's been some controversy as to how it occurred, but there are theories at this point that the FSB may have actually targeted her, and reportedly it was targeting her specifically and not him. Despite the fact he's part of Putin's inner circle, and she's just a whole other story in herself. But she is pretty surprisingly in decent shape, considering that she died when her car exploded, and it ejected her reportedly 30 meters out of the car, as per the original video. Now, when we do have some of that imagery here, and that is the first link, I'm going to bypass that because it's not something that I think we should be showing here on the channel. But this is from the funeral. And yes, in very pristine condition, considering that she had just been blown up and ejected from her car by about 30 meters. Very good condition. I know that a lot of stuff can be done in post-mortem, but that's extensive. Very extensive. Especially for the level of damage. Normally that would be cause for a closed casket. And, but also, this is Dugin himself seems very grieving. Could be shock. However, there is some controversy regarding some of that. And here's Dugin's speech regarding his daughter at her funeral.
Просто чуть ли не первыми ее словами, которые, конечно, мы ее научили. Это была Россия. наша держава, наш народ, наша империя. С детства просто чуть ли не...
When she was a child, almost her first words, very advanced for a child, by the way, which of course we taught her, were Russia, our mighty state, our nation, our empire. Yes. Very nice. By the way, we have an independent translator here on the channel. She's very lovely and works very diligently on making sure that this stuff is correct. So we do know that that is what he is in fact saying. It's not some kind of a botched thing there. Once again, also, the leader of Russia's LDPR party, Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, has said something that's very reminiscent, and this is something that has been brought up before, is the rhetoric of the Russian Federation is very similar to how Hitler stated a lot of stuff. If you listen to the rhetoric regarding them invading Ukraine and why they have invaded Ukraine, if you take Hitler's speech regarding why he's invading Czechoslovakia or Romania or any of that, then, or Poland, for instance, and you just replace, Kiev regime, replace some stuff with Kiev regime and you replace it with Ukraine, then what you get is you can actually get a speech about that Hitler had written with just words replaced. And that's pretty scary. But what the leader of the LDPR said is one country, one president, one victory, which is one of the Nazi slogans, one people, one Reich, one Führer. So pretty... Yeah, that's not... You can't claim you're fighting Nazis and then immediately emulate the Nazis. That's not how that works. It blows my mind that something like that would be said, but it has. Let's get Steve said. What terrible words to teach an infant. I know, and the fact that she actually learned them is amazing. But go ahead, just take a look. Don't believe me? Don't need to. One country, one president, one victory.
Страна, один президент, одна победа. Одна страна, один президент, одна победа. Одна страна.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And so to counter some of the beliefs that she was an innocent person in this war, she publicly described Ukrainians as subhumans, and this is regarding Daria Dugina. So she publicly described Ukrainians as subhuman and called for the Russian occupation of Ukraine and extermination of the Ukrainian identity. She also visited the liberated Mariupol. Go ahead, take a look. So that is her right there. And here we can hear the symphony on Donbass that Azovstal is liberated, Azovstal, and now it's Russian. Once again, much like her father, a very big proponent, and once again, because of that, they were in Putin's inner circle. So, Steve, what, Russia gaslighting? Never. Yeah, no kidding. Well, despite the fact that it's day 2,733 since an opposition leader, Boris Nemtsov, was murdered beside the Kremlin, and the FSB still hasn't found anything, by the way, regarding that. Just take a look at that. Yep, look at that. Weird. 2,733 days for that person, 4,786 days, 5,798 days. Took 2 days. 2 days. 2 days, and they identified that it was a Ukrainian female named Natalia Vovk, who supposedly was part of the Azov battalion, crazy enough. The Ukrainian government denied any connections regarding the assassination. The Azov ID of Volk released by the FSB has been proven to be photoshopped using forensic software. Very nice. Yep. Yeah. That, I'm sorry, but they're not very good at this. Yep, look at this. Minimal cluster size, block size. Yeah. Cool. Vov became from Ukraine with her 12-year-old daughter and a cat in order to kill Dugina. Fantastic. So, absolutely wild. And then here's a couple of other inconsistencies for you. So they knew her house, they searched her car, filmed her routes, and still let her kill Dugina and leave the country. They had all of this, and they still let her kill somebody. Reportedly, right? So this is the... This is ridiculous. Yeah, menacing. I know. Crazy crazy that it took them 2 days to identify a Ukrainian that was in the Azov battalion that they had already been tracking inside their country, that somehow managed to get off an assassination on a very high-profile VIP within the Russian Federation. Huh. That's kind of weird. That went real quick. That's pretty crazy. It's like it's not true. I think we're missing some details in this one. I don't know. It may be, but I think we might be missing a couple details in the investigative reports there. But yeah, so that's what's happening with that situation. So girl assassinated, may or may not be dead. I mean, we don't even know. She doesn't look like she was even killed. It looks like somebody died, but it doesn't. Her body doesn't bear any very obvious marks of having been killed in an explosion in their car, and then ejected and hit the pavement at Mach 1. But so Erdogan says that Crimea must be given back. So the international community had a Crimea conference and a Crimean summit today. And Erdogan said that according to the international law, it was necessary to return Crimea to Ukraine in order to maintain its territorial integrity and stability in the region. Once again, Ukraine has defined that taking back Crimea is one of the objectives in order for Ukraine to declare itself victorious in this war. President Zelensky made that very clear. And the international community, which hasn't talked about this hardly at all, is now going to back that. And I think it's something that has been coming since 2014. It's something that has been pretty hinted at, throughout the years. And now that this war is ongoing, it's like, well, screw it, let's do it. And everyone's just going to jump on board. No problem. And that's not a problem with me either. Crimea was Ukraine, and Ukraine should have Crimea back. But we can see this speech by Erdogan.
наша принципова позиція і з погляду морального, і з погляду юридичного. Міжнародне право вимагає, щоб Крим повернули Україні. Це критично важливо для всього регіону і для світової безпекової системи, для стабільності, для підтримання територіальної цілісності України, для суверенітету її, для політичної системи. Першочергові завдання.
That's not the only thing. Israel and Turkey are going to restore diplomatic relations. Turkish Foreign Minister Cavusoglu met with Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid, during which the full restoration of diplomatic relations was announced. That's going to begin with the exchange of ambassadors. And then he also added that Turkey will continue to defend its interests in Palestine. So that's rather significant there. Yep. So David A. Zarcone de Grissom said that the Lend-Lease thing also includes Crimea as terms of when the support is to be concluded, or some legal speak akin to that. I haven't actually read I don't think very many people have actually read the terms of the Lend-Lease Act regarding Ukraine. The Lend-Lease Act is the activation of it is just an extension of the original Lend-Lease Act under FDR during World War II. The current one is just an extension of that. I haven't read the official manuscript regarding it, other than stuff that the White House has released, but I haven't seen the actual transcript of it. So I can't tell you one way or the other on that, but I'm sure it does, because territorial integrity of Ukraine does include Crimea. It has included Crimea since it became a member of the United Nations in 1991. So there's a lot of talk about territorial integrity, and what that means is that your country's borders are not to be violated, permanently in any means necessary than other than self-determination of the local population. Hence why annexation is so important, to have referendums to do so, at least for the Russians, or referendums. I mean, they're obviously botched. I mean, the Russians interfered with the elections of the United States. So, and that's been proven. So, I mean, they're going to interfere with referendums, 90 miles within their borders. That's the thing. And so the thing is that because it was politically motivated by Russia to do so, and to probably interfere with those election results, or referendum results, and also the fact that they used military force to take it, means that it's not recognized by the international community or under the United Nations. A nation receives its territorial integrity upon its acceptance as a member state into the United Nations. That's why things like Taiwan are so up in the air, and the One China policy is still able to be utilized in that fashion as kind of a diplomatic hurdle, or a diplomatic kind of channel for them to go through when talking about Taiwan and China and Chinese relations. We differentiate them here on this channel because they are, in all essence but name, two separate sovereign nations. In fact, it's one of several sovereign nations, very few in fact, that are considered sovereign nations, but are not members of the United Nations. And so that's kind of what territorial integrity means. Means that your nation's borders, unless your own population determines them to be otherwise, maintain what they are without outside influence upon being accepted into the United Nations. Both Ukraine and Russia are members of the United Nations, and therefore are required to respect that territorial integrity. And Russia is not. But anyway, going back into this, Turkey's going to continue to defend their interests in Palestine. They're rebuilding their relationship here, and this is between. This is coming from Yair Lapid, who is the. Who is the Prime Minister of Israel. We're just going to follow him real quick. Got to expand those sources, guys. The more sources, the better. Always. That's how you get confirmation on these things. And so that's very good. It means that the region is going to have a little bit more stability, and that's very important. It's very important to see that that's going to be occurring. Israel isn't very well liked within the region. They haven't been very well liked or received since they came into the region in 1948. There's been several wars that have been fought over this, and there's a lot of tension between the Israelis, who are for the most part a Jewish population, with the mostly Muslim neighbors and Muslim Palestine, which was its own country until Israel was poofed into existence by the United Nations immediately following World War II and the Holocaust. As we jump over into Syria, as we were working our way here into the Middle East, we have a couple of different developments. The first one was that on the night of August the 15th through the 16th, unidentified people fired rockets in the direction of the U.S. Armed Forces located in Deir ez-Zor province. The goal of the militants was to strike an American garrison at the Umar oil fields and gas field. Casualties and destruction were avoided. This is in, I do know this area very well. This is in the same general vicinity as what occurred during the Battle of Kasham at the Conoco gas plants, which is owned by the Conoco company, and it has U.S. garrison there. Or did have anyway. I don't know if they still do, if that's the facility they're using. There's a couple of different facilities in that area that are majority SDF, or Syrian Democratic Forces, mostly the YPG and YPJ. There's a conglomerate of about 6 different groups within that organization itself. And back in 2018, pro-Assad militia, as well as about 300 Wagner troops, attacked a small garrison of YPG fighters, as well as American Special Operations Forces and U.S. Marines that were located there February 8th of 2018. And they were bombed into oblivion, and we killed, I think, upwards of 100 pro-Assad regime troops, destroyed several armored vehicles, including several tanks, and also killed and wounded about 300 members of the Wagner Group, which is a Russian mercenary organization. But that's what we're seeing here. Oh, attack at Green Village. Okay. Yeah. Okay, sweet. I know where that's at. So coming from Baghdad, this is the Operation Inherent Resolve, Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve regarding immediate release from the 16th. According to Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve officials, multiple rounds of indirect fire landed in the vicinity of Green Village in northeastern Syria shortly after 9 p.m. on August the 15th. In the latest attempt to attack coalition forces and our partners, rockets endangered the civilian population in the area and its infrastructure. Several rockets failed to launch and were recovered by coalition forces and their Syrian Democratic Forces partners before they could pose any additional threat to the local population. Thankfully, on this occasion, there were no casualties and no damage reported. However, the attacks like this risk both the lives of innocent civilians and important infrastructure due to their indiscriminate nature, said Major General John Brennan of the Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Resolve Commander Force. Earlier this year, on January 5th, coalition forces at Green Village were attacked by Iranian-backed malign actors and 8 rockets that resulted in minor damage to the base and the mosque nearby. Brennan stressed that the cowardly and unsuccessful attack would not distract the coalition or their partners from their mission. The coalition is proud to be a reliable partner in the efforts to maintain lasting defeat of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, and our commitment to is unwavering despite these reckless actions by those responsible. During my time in Syria, there was an estimated 70,000 Iranian fighters that had crossed into the country and were operating amongst multiple different groups and sects within the region. So that number is most likely increased quite significantly, especially following things like killing the Quds commander, Qassam Soleimani, in Baghdad, and all the other incidents that have been ongoing throughout this region, as political instability in and around this region is slowly but surely degrading from an already rocky standpoint. You can see some of these homemade rockets. They are quite ingenuitive in how they do these things. Are they the most accurate? No, but they don't need to be. It's a show of force more than anything, and insurgents are pretty crafty in how they handle things. I've seen IEDs, I've seen IED craters so big that you could swallow an MRAP into them, and there's quite a significant amount of those in the country. It's a terrible place. It sucks. From personal experience, it sucks pretty bad. And there's about 40 different groups fighting each other, and it's a mess. It's a mess to try and follow. I don't fully understand it, and I was there, so that's should be pretty telling. Down here at At-Tanf in Syria, this is in southern Syria, an American military unit was attacked by unknown UAVs. The International Coalition and Air Defense Forces managed to shoot down one of the drone, and the second one fell in the territory of U.S.-backed militants of the Jash Magvir Asura, and during the explosion, the casualties and destruction were avoided, meaning that there were no casualties, there was no major destruction. Once again, Operation Inherent Resolve released a statement. Now there isn't a whole lot I can tell. I don't know a whole lot regarding the United States presence at At-Tanf. My time was spent in up in the Hasaka and the Deir ez-Zor provinces, which is up here north of the Euphrates River. But I do know that in this general region there is a good coalition presence there, mostly because this runs along, I want to say it's the M10, or not the M10, but this highway runs all the way into Syria, all the way across Iraq, and over into Iran. And that's how they funnel Iranian fighters into the country, is they take this highway. As we move over here into Kabul, there was a very powerful explosion in a mosque in Kabul. It left about 30 people dead, including a Taliban preacher, with another about 60 that are injured. Those are relative estimates. And the reason being is that the Taliban really cracked down on any kind of journalism ongoing within those countries. They really don't want to release any figures regarding these attacks. It doesn't put them in a good light, and it can create unrest in a country that's already very fragile. While the Taliban has consolidated their power, they're in the midst of a major economic crisis, and they're also battling other groups, including the Islamic State. And as a result, it makes it a very difficult situation for the Taliban to maintain their power, especially as there is an ongoing rebellion inside of a part of Afghanistan just north of Kabul that was run by Ahmed al-Massoud II. So that is it's a very fragile situation. They've also had several natural disasters, but they don't want to release this information to the public. It doesn't paint them in a good light as they're trying to consolidate their power and trying to build international relations throughout the world. But we do know at this point, at least according to local sources, that about 30 people have been killed and another 60 are injured. Once again, no one has claimed responsibility for this attack, so we do not know the group that has perpetrated this. Jump over here into Southeast Asia, and in southern Thailand, several explosions and some arson has been occurring. Authorities say explosions and fires broke out in at least 17 locations throughout southern Thailand on Wednesday, on the 17th, and several coordinated different attacks. They left at least 7 people were injured, and police, according to military and police statements, the explosions and arson occurred after midnight and targeted shops and a gas station within 3 different provinces. No one at this point has claimed any responsibility for those attacks, however. So we just don't have any more clarification regarding the situation ongoing there in Thailand. We'll hopefully get some in the near future. We bounce back over here into Africa, where in Somalia, here in Mogadishu, a terrorist attack occurred in the capital. It hit the Hyatt Hotel. I'm sorry, I really do not know how to say that. And the target is most likely some very important representatives of the Ministry of Internal Affairs that were located there. At the moment, it's known that there were a lot of explosions on the territory of the hotel. Among those were car bombs, as well as about the storming of the building by Al-Shabaab militants. They have already taken responsibility for the attack. Al-Shabaab is an Al-Qaeda-linked terrorist organization that has an immense amount of power within the country of Somalia. Somalia has been, well, let's put it lightly, very politically shaken in the last few decades. Really since the collapse of their government. They've tried to rebuild their government and have gotten a lot of international support in doing so, but it's still very fragile. And Al-Shabaab has quite a significant impact in these regions. We've seen them attack even other forces, such as Burundi military forces that were located in the southern part of Somalia. Over 100 Burundi troops were killed, and an entire base was captured, looted, and raided and taken over. So Al-Shabaab has quite an immense amount of power and influence within this region, and the military really does not have the capacity to deal with it in a very successful manner. And we see a lot of attacks like this one, which was especially horrendous. We can go ahead and take a look at some of this.
إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
So once again, some pretty major attacks by Al-Shabaab. Somalia officially announced the completion of the operation to clean up the hotel. It took about 30 hours. According to the Ministry of Health, 21 people have been killed with 117 injured, and the bodies of 3 Al-Shabaab militants were also found underneath the rubble. We do get that, and so that is the Hyatt Hotel right there. Quite some extensive damage, to say the least. As we move over here into the Borno region of Nigeria, what we end up finding is that the Islamic State militants continue to terrorize military personnel within this region. The Islamic State is very powerful throughout Africa. In fact, in a conference and a summit in Morocco, it was declared that the fight against ISIS, the leading front is Africa. It is no longer the Middle East. The Islamic State has gained quite a large amount of following and power within this region. The simple matter is that Africa in general is a much more impoverished region of the world. There's just not nearly as much industrialization within this region of the world, and it's a very difficult region to assess. A lot of it requires humanitarian aid. A lot of it has a lot of political instability, and very recently only gained their independence from colonization. As a result, this region has a lot of issues, and it does not have a strong modern military force in really almost any country that you're talking about. This puts the Islamic State pretty much on a one-on-one with any military power that they're facing, whether you're talking about Somalia, Mozambique, Nigeria, the DRC, or Mali. It doesn't matter. They're almost equal in their strengths. They're using the exact same equipment, to include the technical vehicles, the ad hoc stuff. And so Africa did not get the attention much like the Middle East did. And the Middle East was trained by coalition forces, outfitted, given a ton of equipment over 20 years. Africa did not receive that attention, and so it's very difficult for them to engage. So they're basically on equal footing, strength-wise. Within the Borno state of Nigeria, this led to the death of military personnel after the Islamic State committed to several ambushes against them, and they seized more weapons and ammunition as well as a military pickup truck. And we do have some of those images here for you. Of course, there you can see some of the equipment they captured. A lot less than what I was expecting, but then I also saw the video and it makes sense. These aren't well-trained guys. They're insurgents. They're terrorists. They're not very well-trained, but they don't need to be. If you put enough hate and discontent downrange, a bullet's going to land somewhere you need it to. But that is currently the situation ongoing there inside of Africa. One thing that I almost skipped over here is over down here in Australia. Australia is going to be sending Ukraine, it looks like 300 actually, Defend Tech's D40 loitering munitions. So these are ammunitions that's launched from a 40mm grenade launcher, and they have a flight range of about 20 kilometers with a takeoff weight of about 300 grams. They are being tested in Poland, and then Ukrainian military personnel are also going to be trained on how to use them, and then those are going to be going directly to service in the front lines. Pretty cool. Very cool indeed.
And then there are these. The first pictures of 300 Australian-made lethal drones being tested in Poland en route to Ukraine's front line. It's world-leading technology from defence company Defend Tech's in Dandenong. Each carries a warhead that can take out a tank or troops, fired individually or in swarms.
That's pretty cool. I've seen all sorts of cool stuff that has been used by different militaries throughout the world, and that is a pretty cool one. I've seen some very interesting designs for drones. I've seen everything from homemade drones to that are being used on the front lines. I saw the early development of homemade drones where they just hot wired it to drop a grenade, and we've seen that very well advanced by the Ukrainians. This is a new level. And being able to fire a drone out of a 40mm grenade launcher and launch it in a swarm, that's quite crazy. Richard Cyburn says that drone can kill a tank, according to this news report, but I don't know. I think it probably depends. There's different ways to kill a tank, and it's probably not going to be catastrophic. But I'm sure you could probably get something like a mobility kill with it. It's just you got to put it in the right spot. I think this is probably much more suited and is probably much more effective against personnel targets and light armored vehicles. But as we jump over here into North America and into the Caribbean, we see this is over here in Cuba. And the thing is that here in Cuba, Russia has sent oil to Cuba. Not surprising by anybody. The vessel monitoring determined that the tanker NS Laguna under the Liberian flag deviated from its course and made a small turn towards the port of Antilla due to the impossibility of unloading its contents in a western port on the island. The tanker holds 700,000 barrels of oil, worth about $70 million USD. It was a gift from Russia to the Cuban government after the catastrophe caused by the fire on August the 5th in Matanzas. Sorry. We can take a look at that here. And that is that tanker. So quite significant if true. Another tanker headed there with Russian oil. But of course, Cuba has also been underneath an embargo for quite some time, so it's not surprising that Russia would be trying to expand its influence. It wouldn't be the first time. Of course, you have the Soviets during the Cuban Missile Crisis with Fidel Castro, who is heavily backed by the Soviet Union there within the region, and tried to position nuclear weapons 90 miles off the coast of Florida. Over here in Washington, D.C., the United States is going to be contributing to the World Food Program. Amazing news to hear, considering the World Food Program could really use some help. $68 million USD is going to be going to the World Food Program, which is the main humanitarian leg of the United Nations. World Food Program services areas all around the globe that are currently ongoing through a crisis, and is actually one of the main things that we are trying to support here. The World Food Program alone is looking to be buying that from Ukrainian wheat stocks. Not only does that help the market for Ukrainian grain that's currently trying to leave underneath those international treaties that were recently signed, but it's also because the World Food Program has estimated that 50% of their humanitarian aid as a result of Ukrainian grain, which is one of the driving factors behind the UN backing, trying to come up with one of these solutions to the ongoing food crisis problem. And we can actually see this coming from Secretary Blinken. The United States will contribute $68 million to the World Food Program to buy Ukrainian wheat to address the world's pressing food crisis. We're committed to supporting global food security and the most vulnerable and call on all countries to follow suit. Very good to hear. But that actually allows us to get into some cool and interesting news. So this allows us to go into some really cool and interesting news. Every single night, the fact of the matter is that the news is kind of dark and depressing. It's a lot of crises. It's a lot of destruction and war and famine and drought and pestilence, and it's depressing. And I understand that, and we all here understand that. That's why we take a break every Monday for our mental health. And the good thing is that we always try to end on a good note if we can, and we have a couple of different things here that's either cool or exciting. And the first thing that we have is here in Germany. And over here in Germany, a rich Stone Age and early medieval graves were found here in Germany. Archaeological treasures, including Stone Age pottery and medieval graves to swords and jewelry, revealed a long history of human habitation in the near the Danube River in Germany. At the site, the Gossingen Gutmadingen district of Tuttlingen, which is in the southwestern part of Germany, down here. Archaeologists discovered one grave from the Neolithic or Stone Age that dates to the 3rd millennium BC, so 3000 BC, somewhere in that time frame, and it contains very distinctive pottery and the corded ware culture. They also found 140 early medieval graves dating back to the AD 500 to 600 range, containing goods including swords, lances, shields, bone combs, drinking glasses, earrings. So it's made. The discovery is made by a team from archaeology firm Archaeotask GmbH in an area near the Danube River where the rainwater retention pond is currently planned. We can take a look at some of these. There's some of those swords that they're talking about. And some of that Stone Age pottery, which is pretty cool. It means thousands of years of history were all located here. And if you guys want to check out any more, you can actually go to rp.baden-württemberg.de, and you can go onto our website. If you jump onto this map, you can actually just click on that link, and it'll take you directly to the article. And to wrap up the night, we jump back over here to the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center up here in Goddard, Maryland. And This is because Jupiter is very glowing in new stunning images released by the James Webb Telescope. James Webb Telescope is the most powerful telescope that's ever been put into space, and they have been releasing some amazing images over the last few months. These are new images of Jupiter, and these observations are giving scientists even more clues regarding Jupiter's inner life. Two images come from the observatory's near-infrared camera, or NIRCam, and which has 3 specialized infrared filters that showcase details of the planet, many of which are previously unknown. Since the infrared light is invisible to the human eye, the light has been mapped onto the visible spectrum. Generally, the longest wavelengths appear redder, and the shortest wavelengths are shown in more blue. In a wide field view, Webb sees Jupiter with its faint rings, and with millions times fainter, or which are a million times fainter than the planet, and 2 tiny moons called Amalthea, and Andrastea, and the fuzzy spots in the lower background are likely galaxies that you can actually see. Something that was very well noted here is that near the poles, you can actually see where there are basically Jupiter's version of an aurora borealis, also known as the northern lights. And you can see that actually happening here towards the edge of near the poles of the planet. But it's a very beautiful photo. Very, very cool photo. And we have another one here as well. And you can see, so this is the aurora's diffraction, the northern aurora and the southern aurora. And you can see the rings around the planet. You can see the moons coming out there. And some of these others, you can see like down here, these little fuzzy spots. These are likely galaxies that are off in the distance. How cool is that? I mean, this is some of the best imagery of Jupiter, or I would say the best imagery of Jupiter that humankind has ever had. It's a very amazing, it's an extremely powerful telescope, and it's going to teach us a lot about this universe, which is amazing to see. I mean, space is amazing. I don't know what else to tell you. And I cannot wait because I believe it's the Artemis rockets are getting ready to be going up into space, hopefully here soon. They said it's supposed to be the end of the month or early into September. Hopefully we'll get to see some more cool space stuff here coming up in the near future, should NASA be going along with its plans, at least as scheduled. So it's pretty cool to see everything that's been happening in the news, and I hope that you guys like some of the changes that we've done here. And I hope you enjoy kind of a little bit of a more personable view of this. And I hope that you guys are going to be looking forward to some of the stuff that we have coming up. Something that's been very big and heavily requested by you as the community is that we do some more shorter form content. And I'm currently asking for ideas for anything that you guys might have for shorter content, stuff that I could dive into and research and put out for you guys in normal YouTube videos or shorts and stuff like that. So please, if you have an idea, shoot it in the comments of this video. I'm going to go through all of the comments and see what you guys have to say. And then also, be sure to give your love and support to the organizations in the video description. There are a ton of organizations that are down there that cover a ton of different places. You have, of course, all of the ones for Ukraine, but also check out other places like Somalia, Ethiopia. Check out the ones that are for Southeast Asia. And if you have more, our Discord is also linked in the description. And jump onto our Discord. You can, of course, enjoy the community that's on there. It's very active. It's very funny. There are memes I get posted on there. It's have me dying at work sometimes. And the people are awesome, too. You guys have built an amazing community here. And I cannot thank you enough for everything that you've done for us. And you've done for this project. This is really you guys that drive this. And you guys continue to support us and even more importantly, this organization. So please please check out all of those organizations. Give your loving, warm support, your love and support for them. If you can't give a lot, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Trust me, I understand. But help us grow this. We're going to have a bigger impact as a community on helping people throughout the world deal with the very same crisis that we're reporting on every single day here on this channel. The more people that come here and watch this and join in the community, and that's the whole point of this project. We're never doing super chats. We're never doing any kind of merchandising. Everything we do is for charity. We want to raise $1 million through charity fundraisers just through the streams once we get to the point we can add them. We want to do amazing things with this project, and it's only capable of being done with your guys' continued support. So thank you very much. I love the community so far. You guys have been awesome, and it's really great to be able to do some cool stuff. I'm looking forward to doing a lot more cool stuff here in the future. Hopefully we'll get some really good ideas. Some have already been pitched, and I can't wait to try them out. And hopefully we'll see you guys once again tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. My name is Paul from the New News. Have a great night, everybody. Please be safe. I hope that you, your family, and friends are safe. And we will hopefully see you once again tomorrow for our next stream covering 24 hours of what's happening throughout the globe in the top headlines. See you guys.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всі хвосту змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шверхуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkle bomb. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стоять до волноваги, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.